Hello guys, today what we're going to be doing is a past paper question. Now, normally this past paper question on the Unit 2 would be a bit shorter than an hour. Generally speaking, you're probably thinking about using about 40 minutes, half an hour to 40 minutes on it. But I think it's our first one and we should maybe take a little bit more time to really go through the question before we start working out how we can just do these on nothing. So the question I'm asking you to answer is I'm asking you to reread Litany on page 5, explore the ways in which Duffy presents memory in this poem. So you will remember we went through Litany by Caroline Duffy before. I will make sure that that video is still linked in your classroom so that you can see it. But all that you need to do is go back, double check that poem, make sure you know what you're talking about. Now you can see this is the question we're actually answering in this blue box, but what I've done is I've pulled a little section from a past paper, so you can see it's all laid out nicely WJEC style, because literally all I did was screen cap it so that I could show you. You on the Unit 2 would always have a choice of 2 questions. So you're always going to have a choice between the Duffy and the Larkin. You will probably remember way back when you did your GCSEs, your English teacher saying something to you like, out of the choice of questions that you used to have on the Of Mice and Men paper, just pick the one that you think is easier. It's exactly the same here. These are the same difficulty overall, but for you personally, one might be easier and one might be harder. You might have really studied Room carefully and a study of reading habits is harder, or you might have really studied a study of reading habits and Room is harder. It's okay, but you need to pick the one that fits you. Now, these questions always follow this exact same structure, which is reread whatever the poem is called on page, whatever page it's on. Explore the ways in which whatever the poet's name is, and then it will be presents or creates setting or does something. And then all you need to do is focus on what they've asked you to focus on. So the question kind of prompts you towards which assessment objectives you need to talk about. So those assessment objectives are here. Now I apologize if it's tiny, you can make your screen bigger, but I will also make sure that the assessment objectives are posted somewhere where you can see them really easily. But you can see it's marked out of 40 and it's 50-50 AO1, AO2. So down at the bottom, we can just kind of ignore those things. We don't need to care about those because you're not going to get those marks, but it's basically, did you basically understand it? What we need to think about is a little bit higher up here. So, have you engaged with the poem? Is your response relevant to the question? I.e., did you just write down all your notes from lesson, or did you move the things that you know about the poem to fit whatever the topic of the question is? Because what you should be doing is twisting everything you know about that poem to fit the topic of the question. Do you understand key concepts and terminology? So if you're saying something's a metaphor, do you understand why it's a metaphor? And are you using that to explain a greater point? Or are you just going, hey, look, a metaphor? Because that would be feature spotting. And you'll remember from GCSE that that's not what we do. That's not good. Is your expression accurate-ish? Accurate expression is important because you're trying to get across ideas about language, and you're going to need to be quite specific in the way that you use language in order to communicate those ideas effectively. That's your AO1, and basically you can boil that down to, have you written this well? AO2, I think, is your real moneymaker always when it comes to assessment objectives, because it's very hard to do good other assessment objectives if you haven't done good AO2. AO2 is asking you for a clear analysis of the writer's use of language and techniques. Are you starting lots of your sentences with Duffy? Are you showing that the speaker of the poem isn't necessarily a real person? Duffy is using the language in order to create a specific image of that person. Are you using quotations effectively? So you're not just using them willy-nilly, but you're choosing those quotations effectively in order to support the point. Now, what you're going to see here is that actually the things between the assessment objectives don't change so much. So it will go from clear and appropriate to confident and apt. That's going to be a matter of practice moving up those. So don't panic too much. Just think about the fact that you need to be writing really clear, carefully well developed analysis, a movement onwards from the old point evidence explain. And if we go back to the question, you can see the prompts that you've had in the question to get you to get these assessment objectives down. What have you been asked to do? You've been asked to explore the ways in which Duffy presents, so we know that we need to be focusing on how Carol Ann Duffy is doing something. And in this situation, the thing we need to focus on Carol Ann Duffy doing is using language and presenting. And we know that the focus for us for this question is memory. So we need to be twisting everything we know about that poem to be about memory. We need to go back to that poem that we annotated before with fresh eyes and think about all of the ideas that go to the idea of memory that we can put down. Now, some of those are going to be more obvious because we talked about them during the video, and some of them are going to be more difficult. You might have to talk about the speaker's memory of an event, or you might have to talk about the way that memory has affected a perception of something. But that's the skill that's involved in answering this question. Generally speaking, like I said, for a 40 marker like this, we're looking to spend sort of half an hour to 40 minutes writing it. Realistically, you're looking at it being about the length of a good extract question, probably, in order to do well at this question. I'm going to leave you guys to answer the question now. If you are not sure what to do or you have questions, by all means leave me a comment, but I would suggest this is your first one, so don't panic about it, just give it a go and see what happens, okay? Ultimately, it's your first one, so it can only get better. Have a lovely day, and I will speak to you next lesson.